Good evening, Gearfacts watchers. The Nux drive force. What is this pedal really all about? It seems to me that it blends two distortions. In this particular example, can you see that? Not quite, but anyway, take my word for it. We've got a fuzz face and distortion, which I think is modeled on a DS1 by Boss, running together. You don't have to have two running together, but it does have the capability of layering two distortions on top of each other. It also has a very basic noise gate, a very basic EQ, and some dreadful cabinet simulations. But anyway, let's see what tones we can get out of this. Okay, so that screen looks intensely bright. What I'm going to do is switch to the edit mode. You do that by holding down the save button here on the right for a couple of seconds, and then it changes. Alright, so we've got a bunch of parameters here that we can alter to change our sound. Bear in mind, this is after we've chosen our two distortions. We don't choose our distortions in this screen. This is more of the finer points of editing here. Anyway, pressing the Drive AB button, the one on the left, allows you to cycle through each category. Generally, AB type and EQ way over here on the right are left-right buttons, but that's not always true, and frankly this pedal is baffling to use, and sometimes it'll skip to screens and you've got no idea why you're there. You want to perform a very simple operation, and it can take quite a few key presses and blind navigating before you actually stumble on where you want to be. Anyway, noise gate's presently on. To switch it off, I just press AB type, because that's my left direction button, and that's switched it off. If I want to go back to the right though, you'd think it would be just pressing AB again, but it's not. It's much more confusing, and I'll be honest with you, I really haven't worked it out yet. But I have found that if I press the EQ button, that takes me to the EQ page, then press save again, then noise gate is magically on. So to make a simple move of this green dot to go from the left side to the right side, I've had to press two keys that seem to have no relationship to that function. Anyway, that's a bit of a rant, but it's an annoying feature that makes it a little bit difficult to program. Once the noise gate's on though, it's reasonably good. You can't program it, you can't set any threshold level or anything like that. It's either off or it's on, and it's average. Moving down to our next category, which is cabinet, you can, with similar difficulty, switch this on. What the EQ button does this time is take you through to a selection of cabinet simulations. All of these are terrible. Okay, so what you want to do with this pedal is generate your distortions and just use it as a distortion pedal. Forget about these cabinet simulations, they're all dreadful. Now, I'll be honest with you, I'm not even quite sure how I navigate back to the previous screen, so I'm just going to press... Now if I press type, it moves my dot to the left. If I press EQ, it moves my dot to the right, and nothing seems to get me back. Drive A, Drive B is taking me down, so I can only assume that the save button is going to take me back to the previous screen, which it has done. Okay, so I guess with a bit of repetition and practice, this is going to start to make sense. Anyway, moving down on our main screen here, the next one is P range, and that's the pedal range. So when we've got our presets, you press your pedal and it'll go 1, 2, 3 and then back to 1, or if you've got it set to 4 to 6, it'll go 4, 5, 6 and then back to 4, and so on. Seems like a fairly superfluous kind of an option to have, but anyway, there it is. Moving down, the option is called power on, and it can be set to manual or pre, and I'll be frank with you, I haven't really even bothered to find out what that's about. The next option is bypass, and you can have true bypass or FET, which I assume is going to give the pedal the capability of bypassing the signal, but it might add a little bit of colour to your sound. Again, superfluous in my opinion, I can't really see why that would be. Anyway, let's move on to EQ. Okay, pressing EQ did not allow me to go to EQ. Hold it down. Nope. Nope, we're still being confusing. Still can't make it to EQ. Okay, I think I'm beginning to understand now from your main screen. I think you have to be on noise gate in order to get to EQ. Not only that, you have to be in noise gate off in order to get to EQ. So I finally got there after about 15 seconds of you guys watching me dither around with the switches. But anyway, we're there now, and we can turn our pan pots. This is pretty cool how you can see the actual dial revolving there in sync with the pan pots as I move them. It's purely cosmetic, but there's no doubt that's a fairly classy feature. So for drive A we've got threshold and damping, drive B we've got threshold and damping. So not the most comprehensive EQ, but there we go. Alright, let's press save again to get back to our preset modes. This is where the screen gets really too bright for the camera, so I'm going to move back again. And by pressing A, B type, I can now choose my top distortion and bottom distortion, the two layers. Oh, looks like it times out of that screen quite quickly. Okay, so I've just mucked around with the buttons for another 15 seconds or so trying to get into a mode where I can change my two distortions, but I've found my way there now. So, by switching drive A-B, I can switch between my top distortion and my lower distortion, and you can set the level and balance between the two of them using your pan pots here. There's also drive and tone functions. The third dial here is for panning, which never seems to be active, so I'm not sure what mode you'd have to be in to actually see a panning option, but I guess the idea is I could have fuzz face coming out of the left speaker and modern distortion coming out of the right hand speaker if I wanted to. Haven't figured out how to do it. I can imagine it would be a bit of a nightmare though. Anyway, by pressing A and B type here, it'll just cycle through the various distortions. Whoa. Let's try for something a little bit more conservative. Okay, vintage overdrive. Now you can hear there's quite a lot of noise coming through there, so I'm going to switch over to my edit mode there, and I see that the noise gate is actually on. Now I'm using a pretty expensive Fender cable and a reasonably good quality guitar here, so I'm not quite sure what the source of all this noise is. Just playing through studio monitors, but anyway, let's go back to our main screen. Okay, we've got vintage overdrive. Let's switch down to our lower layer of distortion and change that to something a little more conservative as well. How about just tube drive? We'll turn the drive down to about 20. I'm going to add some tone to that. On both levels. This part of the editing is quite easy. We're just switching between the two layers and just operating the pan pots in a very logical way. And we'll give the vintage overdrive dominance like a level of 81 and switch down to the tube overdrive and make it a little bit more subservient at 50. And I'm going to turn my amp up a little bit. Let's try the opposite now. We'll bring the tube drive up to 80. Switch the vintage overdrive down to around 50. Okay, so you see a massive decrease in the noise coming out in the background, and it's a pretty flavoursome overdrive. It's quite nice. Let's try Tube Screamer. And again, we'll switch over the volume. Let's go to 90 for the Tube Screamer. And cut the tube drive back down to 50. A little bit less drive. Whoops, wrong one. I was going to take down the drive on the Tube Screamer. Down to about 30. Still pretty strong. So quite a nice pure sound, and it does have nice elements of both drive sounds in there. Is it really doing the job though? Let's try a few others. What we'll do is switch down to the tube drive and we'll change that to something a little bit more distorted. Incidentally, you can have two layers of the same thing. For a moment there we had two Tube Screamers on top of each other. Let's try modern distortion with the Tube Screamer. Okay, good sound, but once again we've got the noise really creeping in there. And of course we can go right up to metal sounds. We've still got very dominant Tube Screamer there, but anyway, you get the idea. Then you got the fuzz pedals. Now I've got to admit that is starting to sound pretty good. That might be a pretty good point to end it on, guys, because it's nice to know that after a little bit of experimentation, we have actually come up with a pretty good sound there. I know it's not everybody's cup of tea, but the overdrives were kind of okay at best. The fuzz sounds seem to be the best aspect about this pedal, and I'm pretty sure with experimentation, you could get quite a lot more feel out of both of them. So I know it's only a short demo, guys, but of course you have to keep it real when you're doing demos on YouTube. And I'm not going to make any final real judgment over this pedal other than saying that the operating system is not user-friendly, but the sound does seem to have some potential there. I think it's a great one for the experimenters. Nux have certainly got the price right, but I would be very interested to hear your comments, guys, so please like, comment or subscribe. There are a whole lot more demos coming on Gearfacts, so I'll see you again very soon.